I grew up in a neighborhood west of Boston, a suburb where every house looked the same. I'm not kidding. L-shaped ranches. Every house looked the same. And there were tons of kids. And all of us would go and play outside, and then we would hear our parents call us for dinner. I swear that is why my mother gave me an E at the end of my name, so she could yell, "Stephanie!" And I would hear it, and I would race home. Everybody did. But when I threw my huffy bike down on my driveway and ran inside, that's where my house, that house right there in a Boston suburb, and that is truly my home from a Google pic. No joke, that's what it looks like today. It didn't look like that back then. It was red, different shutters. But my house differed from everybody else's. And the reason is because in my house, the television had to be on during dinner. Most of my friends were amazed at that. Thought that was very strange. Your television gets to be on during dinner? We have to turn the TV off. No, not in my house. In my house, we had that little thing, and it was in the kitchen. And I got to flip the switch and turn the black and white television on. And as we scooped out dinner, and by the way, these are my parents, and my mom was a fantastic cook. I am not, but she was. We'd scoop out dinner, and my father would insist that we listen to the first 5 minutes of every newscast, of the 6 p.m. newscast. That was all there was back then, was the 6 p.m. newscast. Listen to the first 5 minutes, and then the TV would be turned off. And then we would go around the table, and every one of us had to talk about a story that we heard that we found interesting, why we found it interesting, what was neat about it. And it went right straight around the table. And something amazing happened about that, because it seemed odd. It seemed almost trivial when we started doing it. But it was my dad's idea, and it was genius. Because once you started chatting about a news story, it was so easy to talk about anything else. You'd already started a conversation. And it became easy to become a family that actually had conversations at dinner. Conversations like, how was school? Did Mrs. Pelagian call you up to the board again, even though she knew you didn't know the math answer? They asked me those questions. My brother would complain and tell us how much homework he had. We'd ask my parents about how their days were going. We would just start talking, and then the conversation would move on. And it would become movies and television shows that we liked, Happy Days, Don't Judge Me. And we would talk about all of these things, the plans that we had and things we wanted to do. And suddenly we were in a conversation. And it all started because we had already started talking. Everybody had a chance to talk about a news story. One day, as I got a little bit older, it clicked. And I thought, we're breaking the ice by chatting about news. That lady on the news is helping us break the ice and start the conversation. So I made a dinner time declaration. Yes, I did. A dinner time declaration that said, okay, I someday am going to be the lady that starts the conversations. I want to be in that little box starting the conversations. I want people to listen to me and hear me tell them stories and then discuss them. And I never changed from that. My father thought it was funny. I didn't. But I never changed from that. I've been doing it for 30 years now. My name is Stephanie Gorin, and I am a broadcast journalist. And I know that sounds very AA-like, but it's true. I am a broadcast journalist, and I decided it so young. And when I was asked to speak here today, I was so honored. I thought, maybe I can broaden the conversation. Maybe I can widen the conversation with this amazing topic that the students here at Plattsburgh High School in New York chose, Hidden Among Us. Because it's my job, I see it all. I see the good, the bad, I see the beautiful, I see the ugly in people. It's my responsibility to tell it to you timely, accurately, truthfully. But truthfully, sometimes I don't want to. I don't want to tell you the story about the driver who intentionally went the wrong way on the highway at a high rate of speed and intentionally crashed into another car head on. I don't want to tell you that story because on that day, according to prosecutors, things in this man's life weren't going so well. And he was in a fit of rage and he went the wrong way on purpose. He hit that car. There were 5 kids in it. They were coming back from a concert. 5 teenagers, high schoolers, all from the same community, all died that day. Sophomores, juniors, student leaders, athletes, so many of them looking ahead to college, the promise of going to college, the promise of what was to come. That wrong-way driver, Stephen Burgoyne, was the only survivor. He faced a trial, of course. He was found guilty, the judge calling it a horrific crime. Sentenced Stephen Burgoyne to 30 years to life. It was ugly. It was a hard story to tell. I cried when I got home after I heard the parents talking about their children that they had lost. But there was hope in that story, believe it or not. It's the other side of the coin. It's when people come together. Sometimes in your worst moment, you will meet the best people, the gems that are hidden among us. There were fundraisers. There were people who put memorials up, permanent memorials for these 5 kids who died. There were people who put scholarships in their name. These were the hidden people who were trying to make things better. At sentencing, one parent said directly to Stephen Burgoyne, "In spite of your heinous acts and all that you have taken, this amazing community still chooses hope and love." That's the other side of the coin. That's the day where you can say, okay, I've told the whole story. It also got people talking. It got people talking about how, yes, sometimes there are evil forces in the world, but there are also forces of love and joy, including another community hidden among us. And I'm going to take you on a journey right now that's going to go up and down and up and down. How about this hidden among us gem? A daycare worker in Keysville, New York, decided to work with the ice cream man to give a little boy the surprise of his life. His dad had been in Kuwait for 6 months. Now, when you're 7 years old, 6 months, that is forever. And they decided, okay, let's do this. They bring the ice cream truck in. They say, hey, everybody, let's have an ice cream day. And inside that ice cream truck, Staff Sergeant Ballantyne was hiding, and his son, Caden, came up to order his ice cream. And that is what you saw. Oh, I loved telling that story. That story made people talk. It made people talk about all kinds of things, about kindness, and it made people talk about being overseas. It started a conversation. It made me happy that it did. I got so many phone calls on that story. A few wonderful people did this magnificent thing. It's a day that family will never forget. But I have to tell you that becoming the broadcast journalist that I wanted to be and becoming the storyteller that I wanted to be, sometimes, most times, it's more heartbreaking than it is heartwarming. A case in point. A troubled grandson who was paroled out of prison had nowhere to go. His 73-year-old grandmother took him in. She lived in Clinton County. 25-year-old Gustavo Segundo Clark. He had been paroled on burglary charges. Ginger Clark, his grandmother, was found dead in her home, stabbed to death with a kitchen knife. When it was all said and done, the jury found Gustavo guilty of the murder. The judge sentenced Gustavo Segundo Clark to 25 years to life in prison. I told that story on the air that night, and I went home and I bawled. I cried so hard because I couldn't make sense of it. It started a conversation about who would take this magnificent woman out of the world and why. That conversation was going on in our newsroom. It was going on in the community. She used to give all kinds of block parties. She could cook like nobody's business, give her 2 ingredients, and the woman would give you something made with love. She was, by all accounts, a sweet, generous, kind neighbor. Why did this happen? It was a conversation starter. It was a sad one, but it was one we had to have. Could mental illness have been at play here? Did anyone miss the warning signs? These were the questions people were asking. They're good questions. They're things we should be talking about. But again, I also get to tell the very best stories. Like this couple. Cole and Holly Hull. There was a day where Holly thought her youngest son had pneumonia. So she brought him into the doctor's office and said, I think my son has pneumonia. Can you check him out? Can you give him, an x-ray? Can you figure out what's going on? And the doctor did, and she got the worst news of her life. He had childhood cancer. Little 3-year-old Carson, had a neuroblastoma next to his kidney. They removed it. The doctors were able to remove it. But little Carson was very confused. He was in the hospital. Nobody likes being in the hospital. Kids really don't like being in the hospital. He was in the only children's hospital in our region, Vermont Children's Hospital. But Carson's parents noticed something amazing. The children's hospital brought people in. They brought people in to keep the kids occupied so that while their tiny bodies were healing, they were busy. They were with an artist making something magical. Vermont Teddy Bear came in and helped them make their own stuffed animals. It was amazing to see their son smile. Carson smiled and they were happy. They left the hospital and they were grateful. And everything was fantastic until 3 years later, until it wasn't. Until Carson was diagnosed with childhood cancer once again. And once again, Carson went into the hospital and had surgery. And once again, the hospital kept him busy. The Hull family felt so fortunate to those people that came in that made their boy smile, that they decided they had to do something. They worked tirelessly. I mean, look, this is Carson with a puppy coming to see him. They worked tirelessly. And they started something called the Gala of Miracles. And the Gala of Miracles raises money for childhood cancer. And in the first year, which was last year, they raised somewhere in the vicinity of $30,000 for Children's Hospital at UVM and gave that money to them for whatever they needed to do for childhood cancer or to bring people in. Carson and his family became friends because we covered their story so many times. They were the first people to come into our new studios. There's his dad. Carson, I can tell you today, is doing really, really well. These were the hidden gems among us, the hidden people. We didn't know Cole and Holly Hull. We didn't know them until they said, we need to do something. We need to speak up and do something because somebody here made our son so happy at the worst moment of his life. We want to make somebody happy. Let's do it. And they did. They used their voice. They used their actions to do something. And it starts conversations. What can I do? How can I help? Those kinds of things. They now raise money for a wider cause, for research. They have now formed a nonprofit called Hope for Miracles. And they use the money raised here for children's research and for research about cancer so that they can stop or at least do their part in helping to stop cancer from affecting people. You know, something interesting, the people who volunteer at hospitals, at food shelves, at animal shelters, the people who do those things like the Christmas Bureau, they are hidden treasures among our community. The teachers who help students become good citizens, who help students get involved with coat drives, who help them with food drives. How about Volley for a Cure, raising almost $1,000 for breast cancer research this year alone? This group, Volley for a Cure, $25,000. Well, we started talking about that, talking about how much money that was. That became a conversation starter in the newsroom. So if we're talking about it in the newsroom, someone at home has to be talking about it, saying, volleyball players raised $25,000? Do you know how many people are affected by breast cancer? This is an amazing feat that they just did. It's wonderful. They don't do it for the recognition. These are the stars of our community. They light the way, they light the path, and they ask for nothing in return. They are hidden among us. Now, I have to go back to the fact, and I'm sorry to do this to you, that not everybody is good and sweet and nice and kind. And I learned that firsthand as I was studying at Syracuse University's S.I. Newhouse School of Public Communications. I had a choice. It was my junior year, and I could go abroad with all of my friends and go to London and study in London, or I could take an internship at the local NBC affiliate. No brainer. Since 8 years old, I've been telling my dad I'm going to be in that little box telling people about stories that they can talk about. Who knew that little box would be like 70 inches, whatever. But I had been telling him that, so I decided to stay and take that internship. And boy, was that a great decision. It was so much fun. I had started in August, They made me feel like part of the team. I was writing stories. I was putting things on the air. I had my own desk. My God, I was on top of the world. It was amazing. Until December 21st, 1988. I was watching TV with 5 of my roommates. Yes, there were 6 girls living in that house. Do not ask me how we all got out alive. I have no idea. But I remember clearly we were watching General Hospital. For those of you old enough to remember, you did not miss Luke and Laura days. And ABC's main national anchor, Peter Jennings, came on the air. And he talked about a plane going down. And we were annoyed. This plane went down half a world away, and you're interrupting our soap? We were annoyed. He gave us the breaking news, and then he got off the air, and our soap came back on. And my phone rang about 10 minutes later. It was the assignment editor at the station that I had been working at for 5 months, the station that treated me like an employee at that time. They told me the plane that went down in Lockerbie, Scotland, had one very important fact that I needed to know. 35 Syracuse University students flying home from abroad were on that plane. 270 people died that day. 35 of them were from Syracuse University. Now remember, it was my junior year, so a lot of my friends had gone abroad. So they said, we're going to read you a list of names. Stop us when you know one. And they started reading, and I knew the first name. And I knew the next one, and the next one. But it wasn't until about the 5th name that I fell to the floor. And that is not something that just happens in movies. When you get bad news like that, your knees really do give out. 2 of my best friends were on that plane. I didn't know what to do. I mean, shouldn't I be with my friends, the ones that stayed and went to school and were with me, and mourn our losses, our horrible losses? Shouldn't I be with them? And it was quickly becoming clear that this was a terrorist attack. I called my hidden heroes, my mom and dad. And my father said to me, Stephanie, do you want to be a journalist or not? Because if you do, get in your car, get to the station, and tell the best story about Nick and Corey that you possibly can. Tell the best story that will make people start talking, that will make them talk about the people lost around the dinner table. Go do your job. It is the day I became a broadcast journalist. It is the day I became a conversation starter. Because that's what I did. I went there and I started putting together everything. They asked me to bring my yearbook so that I could show them the victims, and we could take pictures of them, and we could put faces to the names. I was incredibly sad, but I did my job anyway, and 12 hours later when I got home, because when you have breaking news like that, it doesn't end. It just keeps coming in and coming in and coming in. I finally got home, and I rolled up in my bed, and I cried until I did not have one tear left in me. But guess what I realized? I realized that day more than ever. By the way, this is the wreckage that fell over Lockerbie, Scotland. And yes, it was a terrorist attack. And it took a long time, but Libya finally took responsibility for it. That experience made me want to speak out more. It made me want to find injustice in the world and stop it. It made me want to go out there and find what was wrong and make it right. It made me dedicated to my profession more than anything else. I was so hurt that day. And I spent my vacation, because it was, of course, December 21st that happened, and we were on break. I went to 16 funerals. It was awful. I wanted to dig for stories that would find corruption and make it end. I've interviewed people on their best days, and I've interviewed people on their worst days. I've interviewed opioid addicts, and I've interviewed people who have spent their entire lives doing good, raising money for the homeless. I will not stop telling stories or talking about ways to make things better. And that is what I hope you take away from this talk today. Not necessarily what's hidden among us, but what's hidden inside us. Your voice is hidden inside you. You have to use it. You have opinions. Speak up. You can be a conversation starter. If you see something wrong, say something. You want a greener planet? Talk about it. You want to stop drugs from coming into the community? Yell it from the rooftops. Do what you have to do. You don't want broccoli anymore for dinner? Tell your mom. Do something about it, because silence changes nothing. Only speaking does. Only action does. We need more good in the world, don't we? We need less judgment. We need more love. We need more kindness. And I learned all those years ago from my father and my mother, I learned that I wanted to be a conversation starter. I wanted to be the lady in the box that started the conversations. I'm starting conversations, but you need to also. Because if we do it together, if you speak up, if something in your gut says something's not right, and you say something about it, together, all of us can make our world far more beautiful. Thank you.